John Lewis was known for his nonviolent activism. Many of the policies he pushed for and the marches he walked in are reminiscent of what is happening today. Mr. Claude Gilmore, a member of Madison's Black Chamber of Commerce, joins us this morning to talk about some of the latest local efforts underway to push for greater racial equality. Mr. Gilmore, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
It's been nearly 2 months since George Floyd's death ignited protests across the country here in Madison. What has been the biggest change since then, and would you relate any of that to John Lewis and what he has put forward in our country?
Well, I think that's an important point. We really are saddened by the death of John Lewis. He was a true leader and a major civil rights icon that will live on forever in terms of what he stood for. And it was, I think, in his memory, we need to be taking actions and improving accountability for all of our citizens, but particularly for our Black Americans.
Certainly. Lewis said there was still a lot of work to do. He participated in some of the latest movements up until just weeks before his passing. I know that there are lots of movements still happening here in Madison right now. Can you talk about what's next? What would you like to see in terms of police reform? I know that's something that you're really passionate about.
Well, I think the governor has put forth some very good recommendations for the legislature to consider, the mayor as well. The 5 things I would like to look at is, looking at improving use of force policies and training in some very innovative ways, and reporting, because we have to increase transparency. The public has a right to know. Definitely prohibit the use of chokeholds. We do not need to see another George Floyd. It was painful. It is traumatic and should not happen. And then also don't have any no-knock warrants where you're showing up in someone's house and they have no idea you're coming in. So we don't see the death of someone like Breonna Taylor. And then the action that's been taken now around removing police from public schools and then looking at creative ways to do public safety. And I think that's important because there are a lot of other ways that we can engage and support in our communities in schools by using the community people who know the community very well and develop trust. And then lastly, the Citizen Oversight Review, which looks at the whole issue of accountability for police, but includes the communities of color, leaders and grassroots folks who can then ask those hard questions so that we make sure that these kind of things don't continue to happen.
You raise a lot of important points there, Mr. Gilmore. Also a topic of conversation this week, Michael Johnson from the Boys and Girls Club floated the idea of putting up a statue featuring a Black Wisconsinite outside of the state capitol. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that would do anything to enhance representation?
It may help. I think it would be important to have that. I mean, we have very prominent people who have done some amazing work, like the late Vale Phillips. People who were trailblazers, but I don't think as much as the statue, it's as much as the actions and accountability of what we have to be doing. We've got to improve the social and economic impact within our Black community. Because of the pandemic, we have been really, really hit hard, both on the health side and on the economic side.
And Mr. Gilmore, how can we do that?
Well, we can do that by I think continuing to focus on the investment within the Black community, entrepreneurs, helping with startups. But in Maslow's hierarchy, Abraham Maslow talked about if you don't address the underlying tenets of physiological and safety issues, you can't do that. So it means food, housing, and jobs are so critical for us to do that. So we have to think about that and the process of dealing with the rent, mortgage and evictions and moratoriums that occurred during the pandemic. We have to continue to do that in order for us to lift the veil a little bit more for what people are going through, because this is a really, really difficult situation.
Mr. Gilmore, that explanation was so valid, and using Maslow's hierarchy was a great way to put it. Thank you again for coming back on our show. We will be sure to continue this conversation with you in the weeks and months ahead. Be sure to head to the Madison Black Chamber of Commerce's website for a full list of Black-owned businesses here in the Madison area so you can help support those, because greater equality certainly starts with acknowledgement and putting our money where our mouths are. So, Mr. Gilmore, thank you for talking to us this morning.
Yeah, thank you for this time.